as we move on to our wrap it up segment, because we don't know how this season's going to end for the Raptors, but if the first half was any indication, chances are things will turn out well for our Toronto Raptors, who, again, as we mentioned last week, Raptors off to a great start in this regular season. They currently are off to the best start in franchise history. It was the first time they've ever led the Eastern Conference after the All-Star break. But at 41-16, they're at a 719 win percentage. Like, they have a chance at winning 60 games. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about how good this Toronto Raptors team is this season, Webby. And sticking with our awards segment, we'll do it a little differently, right? Because, it's obvious. DeMar would probably be the MVP of the team. But we'll put a little twist on this. Who do you think has been the biggest surprise this season for the Raptors? Or maybe just the biggest surprise of the season. Maybe it's not necessarily a player. I'll leave that open-ended for you.
I was going to say, mine isn't necessarily a player. My biggest surprise is that they didn't trade Jonas Valanciunas.
Oh, okay.
And sticking with the big Lithuanian. I know that the organization loves him, and him being a high first-round pick. They love what he brings to the table in terms of his offensive ability and his real talent at the line with the free throws. Mm-hmm. But I really thought that they were going to move him.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where hindsight, if you look back and think just how much people were crushing Jonas for so many years. And I was one of those people, I think you were too, that was always like, they need to give him the ball. No, give the man the ball. Let him cook, right? We're all about all these long twos. How about these twos in the paint? And did he always play as hard as we wanted him to be? And I don't mean hard as in was he trying hard? I meant aggressive. Yes. Would we want him to just get the ball and just dunk everything in the paint? Of course. But he is a skilled big man. And I think that he didn't get nearly enough credit for the fact that he just didn't get the ball nearly as much as he probably should have been getting the ball. And not that he's getting a ton more touches now. I think he's more maximizing his opportunities now, right?
The other thing, too, is earlier in his career, you could really see that a lot of times, especially DeMar and Kyle didn't trust him.
Yeah.
And they'd be in his ear and, kind of giving him dirty looks every once in a while. But you know what, man, this season, especially early in the games, they trust the big man.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of DeMar and Kyle driving to the basket, and especially DeMar's improved on this so much. Driving to the basket,
being able to assists, right?
Yeah, being able to just drop off, and you'll see these little dump passes, or maybe even a little behind the back or a wraparound pass, and finding JV for easy layups or little just hook shots. And it's been a thing to see the development of the team, and you're right, the trust being the biggest factor of that. It is interesting, it is a surprise they didn't trade Jonas because his name was involved so much for the past few years. But my biggest surprise is OG. And I know OG's kind of struggled. Maybe, I don't know if it's a rookie wall. I don't know if he's a little banged up over the past couple weeks. But overall, if we go back to the draft, he was taken, 20th, I think it was, somewhere in that range. My biggest thing with what happened to OG, though, was most people didn't really know much about him, right? Unless you were a serious NCAA head, right? And you're deep diving, and I'm not talking about reading mock drafts. I'm talking about you watched him play in college. Not many people would have been able to tell you much about OG Anunoby. And when he got picked, people were spending a lot more time trying to figure out how to pronounce his name, more so than how is this guy going to fit on the team. But also, he was coming off a serious knee injury, and we weren't even sure when he was going to play, right? There was talk that he was going to start the season injured. And then all of a sudden he was ready for the season and he didn't miss any games. And then it wasn't soon after that he was even a starter. So I just think that, starter and contributing, right? Getting big time assignments in terms of having to try to guard the other team's best perimeter guy. And I think when you add that into the fact that we didn't even really know who this guy was or what exactly we were getting. Now you're getting a starter and maybe when healthy, the 3-and-D guy that they've probably been missing for the past how many years at DeMar Carroll.
And trying to add via free agency or trades. And
for sure.
Kind of falls in their laps.
Yeah, the 3-and-D guy that, Terrence Ross wasn't or DeMar Carroll wasn't. And all of a sudden now, you kind of get this guy and it was very interesting to see, and it's a shame that he's kind of slowed down over the last few weeks. But maybe with this All-Star break, a week off, get him he can refresh down the stretch, and he will have to be a big part of what the Raptors do if they are to, in fact, make some noise in the Eastern Conference playoffs. So my biggest surprise is your boy, the real OG Anunoby.
Now, what's funny is neither of us said Fred VanVleet. And I'll tell you about that because I knew that he was going to be an NBA player, and I knew he was going to be an NBA player for the Raptors.
That's interesting. You're right. Freddie probably should get some votes for our made up awards here in terms of biggest surprise. I mean, I will say if you talk about Freddie Webster, I'll say like when the season started, my biggest worry about the Raptors was I thought they were relying a lot on the young bucks, and Freddie was a big part of that, right? Like he now undoubtedly, between him and DeLon, would have to share a lot of those backcourt minutes. And then if Kyle got hurt, which is always the worry with this team, right? He'd be thrusted in, and you're kind of worried now. Like, could those guys handle the load? To be honest, if Kyle went down, I wouldn't even be that worried at all. And I know that sounds bad, and I don't mean that as a knock on Kyle. I mean that more so as like a way to big up what OG and DeLon have done this season. I just think that those two guys have been so good, and especially Fred. Fred's probably been more consistent in terms of that calming force in that second unit, or maybe even not the calming force, but maybe more the spark plug, right? Like he's kind of the what's your go-to? The straw that stirs the drink there,
The
Webby?
straw that stirs the drink, man. Absolutely.
Right? Of the second unit that gets him really going. He's been a great player, and again, it will always go back to, as March Madness nears, right? March Madness is coming. It's one of those things that we always talk about, that I like to talk about all the time, in terms of we forget sometimes that when you see a dude do something on the big stage that is March Madness, that at least is something that heading into an NBA draft. And sometimes people are so focused on the what could be's instead of what they actually know, right?
Not only that, but a guy who's done it for, I know VanVleet was 4 years, and I think he was in the tournament all 4 years as well. So somebody who's not only done it on that stage once, but done it on that stage multiple times.
Yeah, like it's not a fluke. The moment's not going to be too big for him. Like he's not scared. He's not nervous, right? Like I think those things matter, especially when you need minutes from a young guy, right? Like they needed minutes from him, and Freddie did not disappoint. So yeah, he makes it onto my ballot.
And mature enough to know that, not right when you going to get into the NBA that everything's going to go your way, that you're going to have to put in hard work, just like you did as a freshman, as a sophomore, to get to where you need to be.
So true, Webby. So true. So if we're going to ask the biggest surprise, maybe do we ask who the biggest disappointment? Is there a disappointment from the Raptors first half of the season?
Well, I mean, there's a couple, right? Obviously, we would have liked to see Norm evolve a little bit more. As Serge, I think, for the money we want to see. But I'll tell you, man, and maybe I'm way off base on this, but I thought Bebe showed real flashes last season. Something that I thought that maybe he'd kind of keep going, and they're just kind of not finding minutes for him right now.
I'm trying to remember who it was I was having this conversation with, but when you just said Bebe, it popped in my head because I just saw a picture. I guess Bebe was on vacation with, like, I don't know if it's his wife or his I don't know how to classify their relationship, but it was Bebe, his little baby, and like the mother of his kid, I'll assume, right? And they were on vacation. His wife, I'll assume, right? They're on vacation. And you see this picture and he just looks so happy. And like the caption was something about like Bebe's baby or something like that, right? He just looked so happy. And I forget who it was I was having this conversation with, but it was about Corey Joseph, right? And it was before I guess it was right around when the Raptors traded Corey Joseph. And we're talking, oh no, you know what it was? It was last year. Remember there was a little stretch where Corey kind of struggled? Because he had that really great playoff run. And then last year, he kind of struggled for a bit during the season. It was during that time. And I forget who it was because I want so badly to give them credit for this. But they gave me such perspective on it. And they were like, you know what? Like we're hard on a lot of players sometimes when they make it to the NBA and we crush them, they have bad stretches or whatever. But sometimes, like as a human being, some guys already won. And I was like, and I took a second and paused and I was like, Holy shit, that's true. Like you're Corey Joseph, right? You went to Pickering High, right? And
and you look at Bebe, where he came from in Brazil
yeah,
and stuff, and getting to the NBA, 100%.
you know what I mean? And like it was funny. So when you just said that about Bebe, I was like, oh, that popped in my head. Like seeing that picture, and it reminded me of that conversation about Corey Joseph, because guy from Pickering High to playing on the Toronto Raptors, like you won. Like you have an NBA championship ring with the Spurs, and then you got to play for your hometown team. Like you won, and you're still representing your country for Team Canada. You won in this basketball life, right? And so you're right. Bebe, when you think about it, like coming from where he comes from in Brazil and like being an NBA player and getting multiple contracts and still being in the league and making money and having a family and being able to provide, it's like kind of perspective. And I need that sometimes, right? Because I'm a dude that I'll crush Bruno. You know what I mean? I'll crush these guys when they struggle. So it was interesting to like sometimes pause and be like, you know what? Maybe Bebe won. I don't know.
Now, that being said, I thought he could be Tyson Chandler.
Maybe, right? And like it's interesting because you think of the levels to this, right? Like, is it your boy Meek Mill that said there's levels to this shit? Is that his song?
No, you know it.
And there's levels to different people's NBA careers or just basketball careers, right? Like, if you think about it, there's some guys that like, oh, I'm just happy if I make it to the NBA. Then there'll be other guys like, yo, I'll be happy if I make it to the NBA and I get another contract. I was watching something the other day. It was my guy, Gary Vaynerchuk. He was doing an interview with Nick Stauskas, right? And Stauskas was talking about how like he was talking to JJ Redick and, the importance of, being an NBA vet for 10 years. Like it just seems so crazy to like think that, oh man, I'm going to play in the league. Like my goal, I want to play in the league for 10 years. So I'm saying that to say, there's levels to this shit in terms of if you're a Bebe, your dream was probably just, get to the league, get that $1 million contract, right? And you're good, right? Whereas
Absolutely.
you're LeBron and your goal is, I want to chase fucking Mike. Like I'm Kobe. I want to be the best player ever, like it's interesting when you remind yourself that there's levels to this shit.
Right? No, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Really, I just wanted to bring up Meek Mill for you, but but yeah, I think, in terms of our Toronto Raptors, we're looking forward to that. It's interesting to see them, how they'll wind up doing this end of the season. But really, as I've been saying the whole year, for them and for me and the Raptors anyways, it's all about the playoffs. I'm looking forward to see how that plays out. And my reminder again to fans is stop caring about what the Americans say about you, because you don't pay attention about what the Americans say about the Spurs, and the Spurs are a pretty good team as well. And ain't nobody talking about the Spurs. So why would you think they talk about the Raptors? And also, I said this last week, and I need to say it again. Put your efforts towards being angry about what your networks here in Canada and how they talk about the game of basketball and your Toronto Raptors. Put your focus there. Because if you think about it, do you think there's people in Canada arguing that they don't talk about the Nashville Predators?
Exactly. The LA Kings.
Right? Like we're here and we hear a lot about this, the crappy Ottawa Senators over and over again, the crappy Montreal Canadiens over and over again, right? And why do we have to hear about that? Oh, because they're a Canadian team. So you know what? When the Cavs are struggling in the US, they're going to talk about the Cavs. They're not going to talk about the Toronto Raptors. Get over it, and who cares? Enjoy your kids and enjoy the season.